Derek was a college student who was trying to earn his degree, and he wanted to be able to earn money at the same time so that he didn't have a lot of debt once he got out of college. And to have time to earn his degree and earn money, he thought that he could trade stocks from his house. And this worked at first, and he earned some money, but he made a big mistake. He didn't pay any attention to the forces which control our economy, and because of this, he ended up losing a huge amount of money. You should listen to me because we all want to have successful financial careers, but one of the first steps towards doing this is understanding the forces which dominate our economy. The Federal Reserve is the single most powerful organization in our economy today. The most powerful organization in our economy today is led by Janet Yellen, who is the chair of the Federal Reserve Board. However, Seth Motel, who is a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, wrote an article on October 6, 2014. And in this article, he says that only 24% of Americans know that Janet Yellen is the chair of the Federal Reserve Board. This means that we're not paying any attention to the Federal Reserve. In this speech, I'm going to talk to you about the Federal Reserve. First, I want to look at the history of central banks in the United States. Second, I'm going to talk about the origins of the Federal Reserve. And third, I'm going to talk about what the Federal Reserve does for us today. In 1791, Alexander Hamilton, who was the Secretary of the Treasury at the time, proposed that the United States create a central bank. Frederick Allen, who is an editor for Forbes, a widely trusted financial magazine, wrote an article in May of 2012. And in this article, he says that the reasons Alexander Hamilton gave for wanting a central bank were that it would regulate the flow of money through the economy, it would manage the national debt, and it would regulate all the smaller banks throughout the country. And Thomas Jefferson, on the other hand, opposed Alexander Hamilton. He said that all banks are manipulative tools of the rich. But George Washington, the president, sided with Alexander Hamilton, and Congress gave the first central bank of the United States a 20-year charter, meaning it could be in operation for 20 years. During its time in operation, it was quite successful in regulating the smaller banks and in managing the national debt. But the opponents of the bank said that it was both unconstitutional and it stopped all the competition between the smaller banks in the country. So once its 20-year charter was up, Congress didn't renew it. And Congress immediately regretted this mistake because the very next year, the War of 1812 broke out. And in this war, the United States Treasury had a lot of difficulty in providing the funds needed for the war. So in 1816, right when the war is over, Congress created the second central bank of the United States, also giving it a 20-year charter. And again, this bank was successful in managing the national debt and in regulating all the smaller banks. But again, Congress didn't renew the charter. In 1836, it tried to do so, but Andrew Jackson, the president, vetoed the bill which it had created to extend the charter. And in this way, the second central bank of the United States came to an end. For the next 75 years, the United States got along without a central bank. But the need for a central bank reasserted itself during the financial crisis of 1907. This was very embarrassing for the United States because at that time, it had the best economy in the whole world. So after that financial crisis, the United States started thinking about creating a third central bank. Now, most of us don't know who created the Federal Reserve, but we assume that Congress created it. But G. Edward Griffin, who's qualified to write about this because he's done a huge amount of research and he went to college to get certified as a financial planner, published a book in 2002 titled The Creature from Jekyll Island. And in this book, he says that the real creators of the Federal Reserve were 7 men who were at that time 7 of the richest men in the world. And the reason we don't know that they created the Federal Reserve is that they met in secret on Jekyll Island, which is a small island located off the coast of Georgia. And in this, they chose to meet in secrecy because they realized that once word got out to the people that a bunch of rich bankers were designing another central bank, it would look like they're coming together and forming a monopoly. So they chose to meet in secrecy, and once they were done, they gave their plans to Congress. Congress approved them and gave them to the president, Woodrow Wilson, who signed them into law on December 13, 1913. And in this way, the third central bank of the United States came into being. For the last 100 years, our economy has been dominated by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is divided into 3 main parts: the Board of Governors, the 12 regional reserve banks, and the Federal Open Market Committee. The Board of Governors is the most powerful of the three divisions. It's made up of 7 members who are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. And as I said, Janet Yellen is the chair of the Federal Reserve Board, so she's currently in charge of the entire Federal Reserve. And there's 2 main jobs which the Board of Governors has. The Board of Governors regulates all the smaller banks in the country, and it watches over the Federal Reserve and designs monetary policy. And there's an article written by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, qualified because it's a part of the Federal Reserve. And in this article, which was published in 2000, the staff of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis say that in regulating all the smaller banks in the economy, in our country, the Board of Governors looks into the conditions of those banks and makes sure that it's following the rules and the regulations laid out for it by the government. And in designing monetary policy, the Board of Governors works through the Federal Open Market Committee, which we're going to look at in just a minute. The second part of the Federal Reserve are the 12 regional reserve banks. And these are 12 banks which are located in major cities across the United States. Like the Board of Governors, they have 2 main jobs. They hold reserves of money for the country, and they educate the country about the economy in the section that they're located in. And they do a lot of research every year and write articles about the economy in their section. And in holding the money reserves of the country, because they do this, they're called bankers' banks. Just as we go to banks to get loans to do something such as to buy a car, these banks can give loan money to the banks that you and I go to when they're low on cash reserves. And this is important because it keeps them from running out of money and from failing. And the third part of the Federal Reserve is the Federal Open Market Committee. This part has the most important job of the Federal Reserve, and it's what makes the Federal Reserve as well known and powerful as it is today. The Federal Open Market Committee is made up of 12 people. There's 7 people on the Board of Governors and 5 presidents of the regional reserve banks. And the presidents of the regional reserve banks rotate, so that each year different presidents are on the Federal Open Market Committee. There's an article written by the Board of Governors, qualified because it's a part of the Federal Reserve. And in this article, the Board of Governors says that the main job of the Federal Open Market Committee is to design monetary policy. What this means is that the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC for short, is deciding how much money should be inflow through our economy at that time. And this is important because it can decide what's best for our economy, and it can change how much money is in circulation based on what our economy needs. So if there's too much money in our economy, it can sell government securities. And when it does this, it's selling government securities to businesses, banks, and individuals, and it's receiving money. This takes money out of flow, and the Federal Open Market Committee receives it. And because it's out of flow, each individual dollar that we have is worth more. And this is called deflation because there's less money in the economy, and as a result, banks lower their interest rates because banks raise their interest rates because they have less money, and now they need to charge more on loans that they give to us. And if there's not enough money in the economy, the Federal Open Market Committee can buy government securities. This time, they're on the receiving end of the securities, and they give out money to businesses, banks, and individuals, and this puts more money into our economy. This is called inflation, because there is now more money in the economy, and this makes each individual dollar worth a little bit less. And when this happens, banks lower the interest rates which they charge on loans because they now have more money. And this is what makes the Federal Reserve so powerful, because it decides how much money is in flow, and it can regulate how much each individual dollar is worth. In this speech, I've talked to you about the Federal Reserve. We have looked at the history of central banks in the United States. We have looked at the origins of the Federal Reserve, and we've looked at what the Federal Reserve does for us today. And in conclusion, don't be like Derek, who thought that he could have financial success without paying attention to the forces which dominate our economy and decide how much our money is worth. You need to pay attention to the Federal Reserve so that you don't end up losing a huge amount of money just like Derek did. Thank you.